Well, welcome everybody. I hope everyone can see me because unfortunately a lot of people are circling. Alyse and Andy, can you see me clearly?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. So welcome to the St. John's Power Hour. It is number 67 since we began this back in April, the beginning of the pandemic. And it's a beautiful afternoon. So if you're joining us, I really appreciate it because I know it's a big tease, you know, to want to enjoy that good weather. I'm here in my office at St. John's University Queens campus. And if you are new to our Power Hours, I am the Director of Gift Planning and also the Director of the McAllen Society, which is a legacy society. And I'm really excited today because all our Power Hours, we've welcomed our faculty and our administrators and our alumni that are experts in the fields. But today is about the alumni because I felt like this May we are celebrating our graduates. We have our commencement exercise virtually, but we'll be in person in July. And you know, a lot of people I've been talking to, I just gave a campus tour today to someone who graduated 1971, hadn't been back on campus in 50 years and could not leave the campus. I was blown away. The highlight, of course, was our church, St. Thomas More. That's beautiful. So if you haven't been to campus, I'll gladly give you a tour, especially on a day like today. It was really, really nice walking around. But about special anniversaries and about our graduation, I thought our Power Hour really should be a celebration, an honor, and a tribute to our alumni and our newly graduates. So I have wonderful experts here today that are going to help us sort of reminisce. And we thought we would put some focus onto the conversation. So we're focusing on fashion because when we talk about the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, there are distinct qualities about these different decades, especially in the fashion. And the first part, we have our experts, our professors and administrators that will guide us through. And then the latter part of the presentation, we've invited some of our alumni to really give us, you know, the real life experience of what it was like at St. John's during these decades. I can share for myself because I graduated in 1987. So let's get started. I can't wait. This is going to be a fun discussion. You're going to love the photographs. We have with us Professor Susie Pak. You probably may know her already. She's done extensive research in the history of St. John's, and she's been offering these wonderful seminars throughout our celebration of 150th anniversary. So we appreciate all the work that she's done in digging up all this great information about St. John's University. We also have Dr. Andrea Licari, who teaches our fashion studies. Am I correct? And am I saying the title right? Studies. And you might have seen her at another Power Hour. We talked about fashion and how the pandemic affected that. And then someone at the gift planning office who we are constantly calling for help, and she so great, a great resource to us is Alyse Hennig, and she's our interim archivist. So if you have any special St. John's memorabilia, contact Alyse. She would love to add it to our collection. So with that ado, I am going to turn it over to Susie Pak. Susie, are you with?
Yeah, can you hear
You're
me?
not showing up. Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Susie.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Show this wonderful slideshow that Alyse put together. One of our most precious resources at the university is the university archives, and I don't know what we would do without Alyse. But let me start by talking a little bit about the dress code. So Dr. Licari is going to talk about St. John's fashion from really in the 1960s until the 1980s. But before that, remembering, of course, that until 1955, St. John's was based entirely in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, and then also in downtown. Pre-Vatican II, so pre-1965, and for some time after that, there was a strict dress code at St. John's. And actually, one of the people to research this was the former university archivist, Blythe Roland Brenton, who wrote an article about this in the Alumni magazine several years ago. One of the things that she tells us is that the university administration believed in part that the dress code was a way to distinguish St. John's from other schools, and also to showcase what they called the norms of Christian modesty and propriety. And so for men, for example, men had to wear suit jackets, they had to wear ties, they had to wear long trousers to class. Sources compiled by Alyse, including the 1959 campus regulations, indicate that students could take off their jackets in the classroom, but only if their individual professors allowed it. Men, including professors, could not have beards. The length of hair was also monitored. And otherwise, jackets and ties had to be worn throughout the campus. For women who attended the other schools in the university, either in the evenings at the Lewis Avenue location or in downtown campus, women had to dress at all times, quote, according to the norms of, as I said, Christian modesty and propriety. That meant shorts, pants. What did that mean, right? So shorts, pants, slacks were forbidden. You couldn't wear sneakers or socks. Skirts had to be below the knee. Girls could not wear pedal pushers, clam diggers, toreador pants, these kinds of things. And the Dean's annual report for 1959-1960, by which time St. John's College had moved to Jamaica, indicates that violations of the dress code were actually recorded in a card filing system, which is, I would love to find out where that card filing system is. I mean, that would be an amazing record to give a sense of the culture at the time. What we do know from records like the Dean of Men's annual reports is that the enforcement of the dress code involved professors, security officers, the student council, and especially the deans who conducted inspection tours. And they indicate that the dress code was very important to the university administration, that it was monitored, and that infractions were met with disciplinary measures. Trustee Anita Gomez Palacio talked about this in the first lecture of my Who Was St. John's series, about how one of her classmates, I believe it was in 1963 or 64, was actually suspended from school for wearing sneakers and pants. So students could also be refused admission to class. They could be refused to sit for exams. So it was very serious. So, but what the historical data also tell us, because the school dress code was done away with in 1969. In 1969, the administration released a statement that said, quote, "The determination of dress and general appearance is left to the discretion of the individual student." But even before then, when we look at the historical data, what it tells us is that that this was a process that took place over a period of years, that the students themselves expressed dissatisfaction over the rules. And the fact that the dress code violations themselves had to be monitored indicates that the students didn't necessarily follow them. So they're not always wearing their tie, they're not always wearing their jacket. This is in 1968. And so what we know, we can see the difference when as a historian, one of the things we have to do is we have to look at the difference between what people said people should do and then what people actually did, right? So these are all pictures from the Vincentian yearbook, and they indicate, as you can see, people are in very kind of informal dress, and this is before actually the dress code is done away with. And so this indicates that there's some kind of push and pull between the students, but also, and you can see here they are, this actually might be when the dress code was changed, but in short sleeves. And this is in 1970, by which time we know the dress code was changed. What's really interesting is that the history of the dress code indicates that there is a change in the university administration's attitude towards the students. Even the students' position within the university community. And also it indicates that its idea of what it means to be a Catholic school can and does change over time. And so the rest of these photos, and Dr. Licari, I'm going to ask a question about what the fashion means, indicates the kind of what Archivist Live Roland Brunson argues is what we're seeing is the expression of students now without a dress code kind of freely being able to express who they are. And I just want to point out here that this is actually a picture of Dr. Licari right here in a student area that's actually St. John's Hall. So the floor of the bottom floor of St. John's Hall used to have open student areas, and I believe even a cafe. So maybe Dr. Licari, you could talk about that. But if you see from the 1970 on, and this is from the Tomahawk, which I believe is the yearbook for the Staten Island campus, is that this is a hilarious photo, why long hair should be cut often. So it was also, remember, the hairstyles were also monitored, and that was also done away with. In the previous lecture, in the last lecture of my Who is St. John series, I talk about how even faculty who wanted to have beards had to have permission to have beards. So once we move into the period after 1969 and we look at the fashion at St. John's, we can get a better sense, I think, of how students choose to dress themselves, and then kind of inquire what we think that it means. This is a wonderful series that comes out of the Vincentian 1980 yearbook, which looks incredibly modern to me today, I really have to say, almost like an Urban Outfitter catalog, a wonderful series of photos. I also showed in my last lecture. But as you move through the 80s, you can see the hair kind of getting bigger. There's some wonderful photos also from the yearbook of cars. There's a very strong car culture. We could even talk about cars as accessories as well. And I just wanted to show you some of the photos that we get into the 80s. You can kind of see students, there you go, and kind of, because we're in graduation, in the graduation period, I thought we would end there. But maybe I will stop sharing now and ask Dr. Licari. So Dr. Licari, when you look at these photos, you know, having also gone to St. John's, but also as an academic, what is fashion? I mean, how do you define it as a field? And what does fashion say about our society? What is its meaning in society?
It's an interpretation, an expression. It's like a piece of art. There are no two different pieces. There are no two pieces of art that are the same. And there are really no two people who really dress the same unless you are copying a mannequin. So it's really an expression. And what I was going to talk about, and I'm going to get back to that, is just general comments about the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And then we can jump into specific information on trends and, you know, trends of the 60s, 70s, or 80s, or trends going forward now. So going into the 1960s, that was a period for St. John's University of transition. And we went from a very strict guidelines from Brooklyn and segueing into the Jamaica Estate campus. And so we went from strict to unrestricted, let me put it that way. But in the bigger picture, what was going on is you had an increase in prosperity. You had a lot of civil rights legislation. And you had Vietnam, pro-Vietnam, counter-Vietnam, you had protest, you had rebellion. And that was the first time that our generations, because I think a lot of us if we're talking specifically 60s to 80s, we're not talking about the baby boomers, or I guess we are because we were born then, but we're not talking about the end of World War II. We're talking about the Vietnam era. You had British influence, you had the Beatles, you had Twiggy, you had someone else's interpretation of what fashion was, and it was imploding on us. What was our reaction? Well, our reaction was going from strict code to less than, because there was a lot of push from students. There's a lot of push from the institutional organizations and the constituencies of St. John's University pushing back. And we had a, if I remember, Susie, we had a test period, didn't we, before they changed the dress code?
Yes, there was a period where, like I mean, even in the summer, the question was, even in the summer months, would the dress code be monitored? Or, you know, they had a test period where sometimes the dress code would not be monitored, and then they actually went back to it, and that increased actually the protest against the dress code, because they had given people a little bit of freedom, and then they tried to go back.
It was a taste of freedom, and then to crawl it back was very difficult. So the reaction was, there was a shift in the university. There was, students were looking sort of for an identity. How do we dress, who we are? There was expansion of sexual freedom, drug culture, less so at St. John's than, let's say, NYU or the West Coast, Berkeley, or the Heights, or any of the places there, but we had our own expression. As far as our interpretation in dress, I'm still in the 60s. Men started not to wear ties. Turtlenecks came in. Neckties went into different shapes if they did wear a tie, very wide to narrow. Spectator sports clothes came in. There was a lot of golf. It started with golf clothes being worn on campus. And that was another way of getting around the dress code, by the way. If you said you were on the way to a sports event, or you were playing sports, and the way the guards would ask you is, the way you're dressed, are you going to play sports? And the person would go, yes. Okay, go. So they would lead you so they wouldn't have to take your ID card or get you into trouble. I saw Norm Jardine, who's listening in, said, yeah, he got into trouble and they took his ID card.
That was one of
Norm,
the infractions where you could
yeah,
take your,
yeah, we're going to get, Norm, we're going to get you to talk a little bit later. Halston was big, and there was a big, there's, I think, a Netflix or Prime video on Halston that's coming up now. Emilio Pucci, Valentino, Pierre Cardin. These were the big designers, some of the big designers of the 60s. Okay, in the 70s, you know, the big events, we had Watergate, we had women's lib, we had equal rights for women. At least we got them on the books, even though equal rights still haven't totally happened. Neither has social justice happened, but we're on the way towards that. We had a recession. We had a whole awareness of consumerism. And these were the kind of the events that were happening. And as far as the reaction, well, you had people were trying to be individuals. They were trying to cut themselves away from the pack, even though that may not have happened. But on campus, when we started to be, we could do what we wanted in dress. Some of the professional organizations decided, well, we want to cut ourselves out of the pack and we want to wear lab coats because we're people of science. And the Accounting Society said, well, and I think Alyse has those pictures also.
Oh, yeah,
The
I can show.
Accounting Society said, we're serious, accounting people, so we want to wear jackets and ties. They literally went back to jackets and ties, even though they didn't have to, but they wanted to differentiate themselves. And the ROTC said, we're serious military people, so we want our students to wear uniforms on campus and have pride of those uniforms. So here we are, we now have freedom, and everyone is doing whatever they want, and groups start to say, let us differentiate ourselves and go cut ourselves out from everyone else because we wanted to have an identity. And identity seeking was part of the 70s. As far as interpretation and dress, women wore pantsuits. I remember late 70s, I was on Wall Street and I was all into pantsuits. You had the dichotomy of maxi and mini. So you could wear a maxi, which is past the knee, or a mini way above the knee. This is not necessarily on campus, but it was more, I'm talking about in general society. Denim became a very big player in the interpretation of freedom. We had denim suits, we had denim dresses, denim different cut jeans. T-shirts became a big player, and Alyse showed us a whole array of urban students wearing their T-shirts in multicolors. There they are. And the fraternities, sororities would have their names on shirts. St. John's had specialized merchandise, also names on shirts. And hot pants were in. At the same time, the romantic look was in. If you see in the 70s, women and men both had long hair, silky long hair, a romantic feminist movement. Even though you had equal rights, you also had feminism. And the designers that were there that came really big into play, Ralph Lauren, which is one of my favorite, Diane von Furstenberg. Notice these are still designers here today. Armani, Betsy Johnson, Kenzo, Paco Rabanne. And a lot of these designers stood the test of time because they reinterpreted and they evolved with us with fashion. 1980s, the events. We had the computer explosion, music videos, nuclear weapons. The first time we used the word yuppie, young urban prep. Japanese fashion exploded on the scene. And I can get back into Japanese fashion and talk about that a little bit. And the big thing was two-income families, because with the equal rights, more and more women went into the workforce. The reaction was home computers. If you think back to the 80s, we started to have our own computers. Entrepreneurism, people, if you had a computer, we figured out how to start a business. Still having influence from London, heavy into London punk, the expansion of malls into suburban areas. Interpretation, punk clothes, punk hairdos, big hairdos, androgynous dressing, So you can have big hair and dress that you did not know. I guess it was the predecessor to non-binary dressing. Tailored suits for men, that was a retrenchment. Hats for all, backpacks, sneakers, and hats were a big push in the 80s. Of all of you who are on this call, if you remember all of this. The designers, Ralph Lauren still, Dinah von Furstenberg still, but then you had Donna Karan, you had Perry Ellis, you had Helfinger, Tommy Helfinger, Izzy Miyake, Carolyn Herrera, and you still see and hear of these names today. So a designer really does test us in coming with us within the fashion. The one last thing I want to talk about is yesterday in the New York Times, somebody asked the fashion editor, which is Vanessa Friedman. Vanessa Friedman is very funny and very, she's the Times fashion editor. And they basically asked a question about fashion. You know, it's the trend now is the 90s, you know, clothes from the 90s. Can I go to my storage locker and pull out my clothes from the 90s? So all of you alum who are listening, the answer is no. No, you can't. But it's not only from the 90s, it's from the 60s, it's from the 70s, it's from the 80s. And it's a reinterpretation of what we wore in those periods. And the reason we're having this is because you have designers who were designing in the 60s, and they are in awe of the design. So they're taking the older designs and reinterpreting them. They're taking the 70s and reinterpreting them, the 80s, and they're doing it in a campy style. So you just can't go back and pull out the clothes and just put them on. It doesn't mean that you can't be you and you can't be your own stylist. But your children may say, really, Dad? Really, Mom? So I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna throw it back to Susie to see where she wants me to go with this.
You're on mute, Susie.
Thanks, sorry about that. If people have questions, you know, please put it in the chat or in the Q&A. But maybe I'll just start off by asking you, how do fashions become trends? Like, why do we see these changes in these decades over time?
Well, first off, if you stay with the same fashion and you do not do any kind of interpretation, the market is stagnant. So you are looking for change. You know, it's the same thing as a man's tie is wide and then the following season it's narrow. If everyone wore the wide ties, you wouldn't have anyone buying any more fashion. So they change from one to the other. How we wear, we can take a classic fashion and wear it in an up fashion mode. We can mix it, we can match it. You don't have to stay stagnant in a classic fashion. And I know I love classic clothes. For example, I'm wearing this golf shirt. It happens to be a St. John's golf shirt, but this is the same golf shirt that we wore in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. But in those days, you'd probably wear it with a blazer or a pair of khaki pants. I'm comfortable. I'm wearing, you know, yoga pants. I'm wearing sandals, and it's going to be 82 degrees today. But this shirt is classic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here we have a comment from Richard, yes,
reading
great
it.
tie widths, and the older we get, the wider the tie. Yes, you know, one of and then we have another comment about if you forgot to wear your tie. This is when during the dress code, we have an alumnus saying they grabbed his ID card. Yeah, so one of the infractions where they would actually confiscate your ID card. I don't know if that means that you could get it back, or how you would be able to get it back.
I think you had to go see the dean.
Oh, you had to go see the dean.
Yeah, and then they waved their finger at you, because I remember having my ID card taken, and I had to sit there, and they said, Andy, you're back in here again.
Well, you're probably in that file, Andy. If we had, you know, if we could find that file, we had the historical record of the file.
I'm sure I'm in that. I'm sure I'm in that file next to Norman Jardine.
I know that Alyse had some artifacts that she wanted to show. Alyse, do you want to show some of the things that the University Archives has?
Sure. So we have a really neat variety of fashion specifically related to St. John's. Besides all of the yearbook photos that we shared, I'm going to highlight just a couple of things for you. And one of the favorites that we show off all the time are our freshman beanies. So this is a little bit earlier than we were talking about, but we actually have two beanies in the collection. You can see this one says SJC for St. John's College on it, and this one's quite faded. And if you compare that to this bright red one, SJU, a little bit later, and this one was actually given in an orientation packet to the freshmen, and it was never worn. It stayed in the packet, so that's why this one still looks bright red. The other one was actually donated by an alumnus, Thomas Gold, class of 1954.
Wow.
I'll share my screen for just a moment to show you another picture. But some of those artifacts are some of the favorites, especially when we show them to current students, because the concept of wearing a freshman beanie and freshman hazing is completely unfamiliar to them. So those are a big favorite here. I'll show you this one. If you can see my screen, here's a couple of students wearing freshman beanies and also white shirts, red ties. They also had to wear their socks pulled up high. The men had to wear their jackets. So we have many photographs showing these outfits. This is just one example of them from 1965. And I always like to show along with that some of our more recent similar fashions. This is an I Heart SJU hat, and you can see it is from 2014. So there's still some headgear that's worn today, but it's changed a little bit, no longer part of freshman hazing. And another artifact that I really like is this pin. This pin also came in an orientation packet, and you can see it's being worn by a student on her vest. And it looks like it has a space probably for a name tag. And this is another very specific bit of St. John's fashion. And speaking of pins, we actually have a lot of pins in our collection. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see the other artifacts that I'm holding up.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Well, this is one of the early.
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't think we put 2014 hats. You said you showed screen, or was that an actual artifact that you were showing?
What was that?
The 2014.
Oh, the hat is from 2014.
Yeah, I didn't see that actually. I don't know if everyone saw it. Oh, okay. There's a difference, big difference, right? between the beanie and the hats. Yeah, we've come a long way.
And voluntary, no longer required to wear
Great, exactly.
like the beanies were.
Right.
So unlike this pin that freshmen wore, this is class of 1973. Pins were very popular, so we have quite a large collection of pins in the university archives. I will show a couple. This one is International Night.
That was great.
Have the St. Vincent de Paul Society. Some of these have years on them and some don't. We have the Winter Carnival. So some are for different events on campus. Some are for different clubs and organizations. We have
She can hear me.
Latino American students. Oh, we have another one there. Susan is showing. I Heart the Redman.
Susan,
This one
what's
is
the
recent
stand?
from Spectrum.
The stand acronym.
Well, the button, no, I went to school in the 80s. So the button, I was involved with student government. STAND was, sort of an acronym of, what we were campaigning about for our student government board. So everybody would have different, logos. And so for their group that, during elections, the buttons were really big then.
Oh, great.
But this I probably got during like a basketball rally. So I still have it, and I will give it to you eventually. I didn't give it up yet, but I will give it to you.
The pins are another a really fun thing that shows fashion throughout the year, specific to St. John's. And then we even have another hat.
That's a great hat.
We wore
Very cool.
the painter hats were really for going to St. John's basketball event, because I guess they were really cheap to produce. So these were really popular. I kept mine, and now it makes me feel ancient.
And that brings me to some of our more specific athletic fashion. We have this this watch, which says SJU Athletics. Hopefully you can see it. And we also have our Lou Carnesecca pin. And this one says Lou Carnesecca Testimonial Dinner, September 30th, 1992. 500th Victory, St. John's 81, Seton Hall 65, February 2nd, 1991. And you can see he's wearing one of his famous sweaters. And speaking of the famous sweaters, we have on loan, I'm going to have to move my computer here, so bear with me.
Oh, wow, you got it.
Yeah.
This is one of his famous sweaters, framed. So you might have a little bit of glare. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's a little cool.
And there's also a big pin into his sweater. I hope you can all see it properly.
Alyse, do you know what brand that sweater is?
Oh my God, that read my mind, Susie.
Right? I was like, who?
I was curious. Is it Ralph Lauren or something?
Who manufactured that sweater?
Oh, exactly.
So there's no tag sewn inside that I can see.
Oh,
So it's possible that it fell off, but I don't even see any indication of where a tag would have been. So it's a really good.
I think somebody actually made that for him.
I think so too.
I remember correctly. Somebody made that for him.
Right.
It's knitted.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I think they just reproduced it probably, right, Andy? They probably then made
I
other
think it was one of a kind. I mean, there's a lot of quote ugly sweaters out there, but now they're ugly Christmas sweaters. But
Right. The original one is in Carnesecca Arena, but that's a copy, I believe.
Yeah.
And he has one
I
at
think
home.
I think Coach Carnesecca had multiple sweaters. Like if you look at pictures of him throughout the games, I think that particular sweater he literally wore the original one. I think he wore, right?
Like
but
yeah.
Yeah, I see in the comments that Norman Jardine is saying that he attended the game. That's a historic game when John Thompson wore the copy of the sweater.
Yeah.
And Georgetown won that game, right? And I talk about this in my last lecture where Thompson said, I guess it is the lucky sweater, right? He was like,
right. Exactly.
it's actually, there's a wonderful story about it in the 30 for 30, the ESPN documentary on the Requiem for a Big East. If you all haven't seen it, it's wonderful. It's so much fun.
Yes.
And then we have a comment from a Richard,
Fine.
I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Richard, about the beanies and about how they were used to mark freshmen. Yes, if you read the Vincentian, there's actually a lot of discussion about hazing. And the hazing of the freshmen goes back, I want to say, Alyse, wouldn't you say from the beginning that the Vincentian is really talked about? There was a lot of like strong class identity among the classes. And particularly in, you know, at a certain point, when you have a lot of photographs, you have a lot of photographs of hazing, right? Because it was accepted at that time. Obviously, it has since been phased out. And then we have comments about the SJU white blazer, which I don't know about, 1960. And then also the Army field jackets. The Army field jackets I have seen in the yearbooks, but I don't know about the white blazer. Have you heard about the white blazer?
I think I've seen some photographs of it. I don't have any handy to show you right now, but there are quite a lot of different St. John's, you know, sweatshirts, varsity jackets, all kinds of things. Here's a more recent one that I picked up at one of the student events on campus. I'm always going around to try to add things to the archives. But there were quite a lot.
I see Richard says that he has his green beanie on. If Shu, you can turn on his video and audio.
I was just going to ask Sue to turn on because we've invited some alumni to come on and speak about their experiences, and I know they have some pieces to show us as well.
Wonderful.
We have Norman and we have Gloria Hen, and we have Erin Cusack Jones that'll be joining us.
Great.
Yoshiami. Is everybody on? Because I know I'm on my phone. I can't see.
I see Norman. Hello.
Norman is muted.
Okay, I believe I turned everyone on. I'm just going to bring on Joe Shiami. Sorry about that. Hi, is this Joe? Nope. Okay.
I can't get on either.
Hi, is this Joe?
We have you, Gloria.
Oh, you can me? Okay.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'm not sure which color.
You need to see me if you want to see my jacket.
Oh, yes, Gloria, please turn on your video.
Trying to, it won't go on.
Okay. And Norman, I unmuted you, and Jerry, I unmuted you as well.
Okay.
Is Erin? Sorry, I can't see.
Erin is here. Erin is on.
Persia?
Yes, I'm just trying to see which one is Joe, the caller.
Well, Jerry's graduated in the 60s. Jerry, you want to share some fashion experiences that you had?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I don't see my photo.
The photos are.
We
Hmm.
don't see your video.
Jerry,
Start mine.
Jerry, yep. You're gonna have to turn on your video, Jerry, on your phone or your computer.
All right, how do I do that?
There should be a row of buttons on the bottom, and one of them should be the video button.
Looks like a video.
Video.
It's right.
Okay. I got mine.
Gloria, you want to show off your sorority jacket?
Okay.
I tried to get it on. I'll try to get it on.
You get it on. That's great.
I have to get it on, right?
What color is it? I can't tell. Is it like a grayish?
It's blue.
Green? Oh, it's blue. I can't tell from the. It stands up. Give us a little modeling. Oh my God. You can wear it. That's great. I
I
love
would never be able to button it, but I can wear it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Can you see it?
Really nice. In great condition too.
Yeah.
What does the embroidery say?
Delta
Delta
Sigma
Sigma Chi. And my wife was in that sorority.
Lovely.
Hey, DeAngelis is in that sorority.
Ah, sure.
So nice. So did everybody get a jacket, and did they get it at
Yes.
a certain year? Did they get it in your freshman year, your senior year?
Got it when you pledged.
When you pledged.
So if you pledged in your sophomore year, you got one junior year, senior year. Yeah.
When did you wear it?
And if you wore it on special occasions, for the sorority, and then if you wanted to wear it, you wore it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we had to, as you said before, we had to dress in the 60s.
Right.
So we wore a blazer or with skirt, sweater.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to pay for the jacket?
Yes,
You had to buy.
had to buy them.
And what is it made out of? Is it wool? I can't.
Yeah, it's wool. Yeah, they were very nice jackets. That's why
was
it
gonna-
lasted so long.
Well made. Now
Yeah.
they're too expensive to buy.
It's beautiful. We have more people on. If people would like.
I have something from the 80s I want to show. My friend Rob Stanger for basketball road trips. The rugby shirt, and Erin is my former classmate, and you're on mute, so if you want to chime in. Erin, I don't know, Erin had one of these, but I don't know if you kept it like I did, but. this is the
No, but I
rugby
remember
shirt,
wearing it all the time.
right? These were like, we wore rugby shirts all the time. And then Erin reminded me when we were talking a little bit about when she said she was going to get on this call. Erin, you reminded me, the yuppie, the preppy look and everything.
Yeah, there was a distinction. I grew up in Suffolk County, Long Island, and in the 80s, we were very preppy out there. And then I go to St. John's and I meet people from Brooklyn and Queens and Staten Island, and they're getting dressed up for school, fishnet stockings, leather mini skirts. I basically put on what was the easiest thing I could find on the floor and around to class. So there was a real dichotomy between like the preppier folks, the athletes, and the city folks.
That was so true. Yep. And this I highlighted for the 80s. I think that's when the sunglasses really were starting to kick in. Sunglasses were really popular back then. The Ray-Bans with Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
He made the Ray-Bans popular, so everyone was wearing Ray-Bans.
Susie, you were discussing the other day during basketball season. We were in the 80s, right, with the Final Four. So basketball defined a lot of our wear. We were living in, St. John's t-shirts. But my favorite one was we were playing 1985. We were playing Georgetown for the East Championship prior to going into the NCAAs. And we had these shirts made, and the front said St. John's, Beast of the East. And on the back of the shirt, it said, "Your mother's a Hoya." I kept that. I also don't think you can get away with that today.
You're right.
Oh, no.
You couldn't.
Yeah.
A little looser back then.
Oh wow! Look at
Hey,
that.
That's
has
Norm.
the actual ticket. Wow, that is an artifact. That is a serious artifact. I was wondering, maybe Susan, what we could do is because there are a couple people on. If maybe we could do it chronologically and see who do kind of. So I see Geraldine. Geraldine, what year did you graduate?
1965.
Okay, and then Richard, what year did you graduate? Oh, Richard, you're on mute. And your video is
I just picked it up. I was a TCB 99.
99. Okay, and then we have Norman. What year did you graduate?
I got my undergraduate degree in 69, and I spent 2 years in the Army
Okay.
and came back to the St. John's and graduated with an MBA in 73.
Okay, and then Aaron, you graduated in the 80s.
1988.
1988, and then Gloria, you already showed your jacket, but what year did you graduate?
1964.
1964. Okay, great. So after, Gloria, did you have anything else that you wanted to show?
No, I
Your wonderful
don't.
packet?
I
Okay.
have some things.
Yeah, so let's move to Geraldine.
Jerry would have
Geraldine is
stuff.
right after
Jerry?
you.
Huh?
Jerry should have stuff.
Jerry,
Jerry's
Oh,
favorite.
65.
Jerry and Gloria are sorority sisters.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
All right, I have here a St. John's copper mug for Moscow Mules
Wow,
with the St. John's crest on it.
that's an artifact.
That's a puppet.
And I
Yeah.
have here a commemorative plaque from the blessing of the residence halls in September of 1999.
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
And I have from one of our reunions, this is the moment at the Corniseca,
Oh, I
Arena.
remember that. Yeah.
2005.
Very nice.
And my apple from said the Manhattan campus dedication down in by the Wall Street area on June
Right.
14th of 2001. This is just months before the 9/11.
Great.
And last but not least,
Wow. What year is that one, Jerry?
Redman, it's from the 60s.
It is from the 60s.
It is from the
That's a good-
60s.
It
I
looks
could
so
tell
modern.
it was made in Bayshore, New York.
Mhm,
And of course, it was made in the USA, as it
Mhm.
was everything in those days.
mhm.
But this is a real relic because they had to retire the Redman name
Right.
several years later.
Yeah, so you wouldn't
Yeah.
have that until, I guess 1989 is when they retired it, right?
I know there was a lot of outcry from the older alumni that, Blackjack was the cigar Indian that we had during hazing.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually talk about that history in the last lecture of my Who is St. John series, and about how Father Cahill decided to retire. So there were stages, right? So first Captain Blackjack was retired, then the name was retired, and then you had the mascot. So it actually was like, I believe it was like in the 68 and then 80, 89 and then 94, you had the Red Storm. And then you had the mascot, the new mascot. I think it was in 2011, so it goes over time. So then we have Jerry. Did you have anything else? Wonderful.
Jerry, you don't have your paddle handy?
Oh, I do have my paddle. It's upstairs.
Oh, okay.
All right. You can talk to somebody else. I'll run up and get it. And then
Okay.
I also had, I couldn't find it, a piece of the hardwood from Corniseca Arena, which was Alumni Hall, when they took up the old basketball floor and they put in a new one. I have a piece of that.
I have to jump in here because my father was the director of development in the late 70s. And he walked into Contisac Alumni Hall, and the gentleman, Jack Kaiser, the athletic director, said, "Eat some firewood." And my father said, "What? Don't give a piece away." And he had them cut up in portions about that big.
Yes.
Here it is. And he sold them as a fundraiser for the athletic department, and he won a Case Award for that.
Really?
Office, I have a whole thing, and now I wish I had brought it, but I'm still working remotely. And it talks about in his 2 sample pieces. I'll send you. Yes, that's it.
I
Then
have
these
one.
guys-
Yeah.
Oh,
That's it.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's your father's idea.
Yes.
Oh,
Smart idea.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant,
That's
absolutely
brilliant.
brilliant.
He also forged Louis Contiseca's name, by the way, with his permission.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
so we
great.
have Norman. I think you are next.
Well, it's interesting because in '69, when I graduated, there was a dress code. And then when I returned, there wasn't a dress code. I think I was the only one in the suit. So the dean immediately noticed because I had a suit.
Mhm.
But the attitudes in the '60s, remember, girls played, I think it was six to a side in basketball, with one of the girls couldn't go past the center court. So things really changed. And in the '70s, well, I might have worn a suit. If I wore anything military, I was called the baby killer. So So it has changed. Now I get a lot of people. I still have my field jacket. It's 53 years old. Still have it, and my combat boots. And now if I do wear that or a military cap, I do get people saying thank you for your service, which is very nice. But yeah, things changed. Also, you might not be aware of that, but in the 60s, and I don't know when this rule changed, women could not get an undergraduate liberal arts degree in St. John's College.
Yeah.
Right.
Until 1968,
Right.
unless you majored in something that was not available in university college. So if you wanted to major in physics, then you could get a BA from St. John's College.
Right.
But actually, the reason for that is that the fathers actually wanted to go co-ed in St. John's College. We know at least as early as 1954, but the bishop wouldn't allow it. Because of competition, they were they were afraid of competition from the Sisters of St. Joseph and also the Sisters of St. Dominic, because they had a women's college out in Long Island and Rockville Center, and they were afraid that if St. John's College liberal arts went co-ed, that it would put undue pressure on them. So it was only, and at that time, the Bishop of Brooklyn was the chancellor of the university. And so when I believe it was McIntyre died.
McIntyre, yeah.
In 1968, they took away the chancellor position, and then after that, they went co-ed. In fact, it was the same issue. St. Francis had the same issue because St. Francis is also in the Brooklyn Diocese, so they don't go co-ed until 1969. Yes. So I think. Well, we'll come back to Jerry's pat. I saw Jerry get back, but I just want to turn to Richard because Richard mentioned in the chat about his green beanie. Richard, do you want to talk about your green beanie?
Oh, I love it.
See my green beanie?
Amazing. What is the pin next to the what does the patch say and then what is the pin?
We want action. I want action.
Oh, you mean like it was a target?
Well, I was the same vintage era as Norm. I was in Manhattan College from 67 to 71.
Mm-hmm.
And just like all your other photos, we had to wear suits and ties and all that kind of good stuff when we were freshmen. And I kidded Susan, I think, a little while ago and said by the time it was 71 with Vietnam and Nixon, they were lucky if war clothes, the streaking was in. We also had a quadrangle in the middle of the campus, not unlike the area in front of St. Thomas More Church, and with the path that goes down the center. So as freshmen, we were not allowed to walk on the senior path because that was privilege for seniors to only walk on the path. So it was kind of interesting. Someone mentioned white jackets. Susan knows I also went to Archbishop Malloy near the campus there in Queens. And the big thing were collegiate sweaters. So we all had, because the colors of Malloy are white with blue accents. So we all had white sweaters with blue piping down and a couple of stripes on the sleeves. So we had to wear our sweaters to class all the time.
Oh, wow.
In Malloy in the 1960s, we didn't get to sit for lunch. The tables were high. We had to stand so we could say the rosary. And our founder of the Marist Brothers was at that time Blessed Marcellin Champagnat. And we prayed for his canonization. And a number of years after I graduated, he is St. Marcellin Champagnat now. But Malloy certainly was not co-ed then, and neither was Manhattan College. It was a number of years after I went there that it became co-ed. We had the sister college of Mount St. Vincent, and we didn't compete between sciences, engineering, and liberal arts. But yeah, that was my great beanie. It was. I didn't know you'd cover beanies today, but it was handy in my closet.
Love it.
I think the white pom-pom fell off years ago.
Well, I think it's a wonderful example of how you have a collegiate culture that develops across universities that kind of unites, right? And whether the question of, what is specific, all the wonderful stories that you're giving about Catholic institutions, I think is really wonderful. Jerry, do you want to show your paddle?
Here it is.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that's Lex.
Delta
What was it
Sigma
for?
Chi.
Oh, Delta Sigma Chi. Okay.
This is from 1962.
1962.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Still have it.
And what happened to it? What did people do with it?
Well, they were supposed to paddle you with it.
Yeah.
That's against the law.
I know.
Is it part of hazing that you would do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to dress like little Bo Peep. So
Really?
I'm not kidding. I'm
Wow.
not. I bought my dress in the children's department at May's department store in Jamaica for hazing because I didn't sew. My mother wasn't that handy in sewing. So I remember being in the dressing room with little kids trying this dress on.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing. So how, when you were rushing for sororities then, how did you choose which one you wanted to go into?
I think it was the girls that were in the sororities that we were attracted to, you know, especially there were so many to choose from. And during freshman year, you couldn't join until sophomore year. So you kind of, you know, looked at all of them during freshman year and you whittled it down. So by sophomore year, you knew which one you wanted to pursue.
So was Greek life a big part of social life at St. John's then?
Yes, then
Absolutely.
it was.
Yeah, we all used to meet down in the lounge at St. John's Hall on the bottom floor between classes, and each sorority and fraternity had their own table.
Right, right. That's what Andy was saying. In the picture in 1970.
I was in Theta Phi Alpha in the 80s, and the same thing. We each had a table and a bulletin board.
Yes.
We had to show up as freshmen and dress how the sisters wanted us to. But instead of having complete uniforms like blazers, they would do things to embarrass us. And I'll never forget, they made me wear a button the entire semester that said, "I love Menudo," which was a boy band for 13-year-olds. So being 18-year-old having to wear this, it was quite humiliating.
Well, Gloria.
Ricky Martin was in Menudo.
Yes, that's
right. He was a child. Yes, and look at him now.
Gloria Henn has to tell you her story about hazing, which she had to do at Kennedy Airport.
What's that?
Go ahead, Gloria.
Right. I had to make, first of all, a big egg because my last name is Henn. So I had to carry around this big white, it looked like a big pillow shaped like an egg. And when I got to Kennedy Airport, there were a whole group of older sisters standing around, and their chant was "lay an egg," and I had to lay an egg in Kennedy Airport. I had to sit on this big pillow. They did some humiliating things at the time, right?
Hey, that's bad.
It's funny now.
Are you allowed to share this? Are you breaking like the code?
Well, if we are, it's 60 some odd years too late.
They don't do anything now.
Right.
the statute of limitations has run out.
Right.
I'm fascinated by the fact because St. John's, my office is on the second floor of St. John's Hall. And so when you go into the basement, you know, from the parking lot, from the back parking lot, where the Hawk is now, I don't know if the Hawk was then there.
No.
We have to kind of like walk in fear of the Hawk through the back parking lot. It's the English offices are on the right. And then there's a theology and philosophy offices, I think, on the floor. But the idea that that was a cafe and an area to hang out, I'm like, why did we change this?
Because you have the student union.
Yes, and then right, the student union, the Rathskeller is now offices.
Right.
Stu's sitting there. Stu's sitting there right now.
Yeah,
I'm in it right now. Well, that's the second floor. What I'm in now is was the radio station.
Oh, yeah.
Was my office. Yeah,
Yes.
probably.
Now D'Angelo serves it.
When they opened the Rathskeller, I was on the advisory board because purely coincidentally, I'd spent my service in Germany. So I'd actually been in a Rathskeller. I don't think they invited me to too many meetings because whatever that Rathskeller wasn't like any Rathskeller I was ever in.
My sister in 1992, she was married in the small chapel the cocktail hour of her reception was in the Rathskeller, and then her reception was in the UC. And they did it, and it looked, it was lovely.
That's cute.
Yeah.
How nice.
I mean, when I have interviewed alumni for my project, they will often talk about how much fun they had hanging out in the Rathskeller or in these spaces, just like as you're talking about, kind of having the sorority tables. And I know, you know, thankfully the students now have D'Angelo Center, you know, that big first floor where they really hang out, or on the second floor where the Starbucks is, they hang out there. But it would be wonderful to have large those kind of communal spaces like the University Union. You know, I know that in Tobin, in the newly renovated area, a lot of people hang out in that first, you know, that floor. But it seems like that's kind of where memories are made, where you see each other. You might see people not in your school or not in your class. Yeah, having those spaces. Yes, Andy.
Susie, there was a designated space for each fraternity and each sorority in St. John's Hall, the basement, or the first floor, I think basement, I think it was. And it was a formal designated area. That the university does not have that in an big open space anymore.
Yeah.
So you can meet your friends by the fireplace in DAC, or you can meet your friends somewhere and hopefully you can find a table. But in those days, it was a formal designated space. And maybe if we had formal designated space today, that would encourage students to talk to each other and not text each other.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really interesting thing because the university was so big at the time as well. I mean, think of the number of students. St. John's was huge. I mean, it is still quite big, but it was so big. But then they did have these kind of spaces where students hung out. I mean, I have also seen a lot of pictures. One of the stories that I hear a lot from alumni is about the parking lot. People will kind of complain to me endlessly about the parking. And then you see the pictures in the Vin section where it literally looks like cars are parked on the lawn. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I think was different before they had dorms.
Say that again, Erin?
Before the university had dorms, many kids just, you know, went to school. It was a commuter college and then went home. So their friend base was still with their high school. But what I noticed, and Susan can attest to this, the people who got involved in sororities, fraternities, sports, student government, etc., really found a home there. And that's why it was important as for have our special spaces. I remember literally I would go to the student government offices, and if no one was around, I went, okay, I'll go to the St. John's and see if my sorority sisters are here. They weren't there. Okay, I'll walk over to alumni hall because I'll meet my athletic friends there. So we all kind of identified, because since we didn't have the dorm experience, we did that.
Yep. We don't have an extension office.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the consequences of building the dorms is before they had dorms, student athletes could get a fee, a residency fee. And since Lou only recruited New Yorkers, they didn't really need a residency fee. But once the dorms came, the residency fees left and our ratings went down.
Yep.
Oh.
I have heard that theory. I think I actually read an article about that in the New York Daily News about you know, how the dorms impacted recruiting.
Well, it's between that and the Catholic high school system disappeared, and Lou would recruit from Malloy, or I mean, when I went to Power, I went to high school with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and they must have, if you could breathe, they accepted you at St. John's. There must have been 50 or 60 Power guys went to St. John's, I guess in hopes that Kareem would come, because he kept it down to Kareem. He kept it down to St. John's and UCLA. And many of those guys, they were in college. They really were in college sex. They did not graduate. But yeah, I think with the pipeline of Catholic schools that, let's face facts, the Catholic schools did recruit basketball players. So you would find good basketball players. So I think between the two of them, that's probably part of the reason St. John's never adjusted its recruiting.
Richard Lapchick, Joe Lapchick's son, who is very prominent in the field of sports, talked about this in his book, where he said, Joe Lapchick was forced to retire at the age of 65. And during that time, and this was in the 60s, he would have been at the school at the same time as Gloria and Jerry.
We remember him.
And
Yes, but he died shortly after that. So even if he stayed, Joe Lapchick, when he coached the Knicks during the 50s, he coached the Knicks during the 50s. Now, the Madison Square Garden wasn't necessarily the home of the Knicks. They played on the 69th Regiment Armory and places like this. And they practiced in an armory that no longer exists on 10th Avenue and 60th Street, where the Fordham University Lincoln Center campus is.
Oh.
And that was right next to Power. So Joe Lapchick would practice, and the Power students would go across the street, and they would practice, and that's where they played the game before they built the Gold Star Gym. So there was always a close relationship between Power and Joe Lapchick. Then the Knicks, I don't remember if the Knicks fired him or the St. John's job came open, but he died, I guess he was 67. So and in 65 is when the big strike came on. So they weren't going to extend anyone because they didn't have to extend all those union guys. So if you were 65, you were out. But he was seriously ill by that time.
well, according to Richard, he says that his father being forced to retire came as a surprise, but also that, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was a New York native, as you said, at that time known as Lou Alcindor, actually really wanted to come to St. John's, but he wanted to play for Coach Lapchick. And when Coach Lapchick was forced to retire, that's when he went to LA.
No, that's not true. Lapchick's retirement, and I do talk to Kareem. He's my classmate.
You can ask him because it's in Richard Lapchick's book.
It's not in Kareem's. Lapchick, that firm 65 didn't come out. Kareem had already decided to go to UCLA. I mean, he did, to a certain extent, he regretted it because it was a different environment. He was very close to his father. He was an only child.
I think it's on Instagram. Maybe if I write to him, he'll ask me. He'll answer.
Here's a picture of Coach Lapchick.
Yeah, that's a wonderful picture.
64 yearbook.
Yeah, there's an alumnus who wrote a wonderful biography of him, actually, as well. Oh, the name is escaping me. Too many books in my head. Did anyone else want to show? I know, Alyse, I think you had an artifact that you wanted to show. I think it was of the mascot.
I do have, I don't have something showing the earliest mascot, but here's one of the pins, one of the earlier pins that says Redman on it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually in that transition period when we changed to Red Storm, but this was one of the sort of
the horse
interim mascots. There were a couple that you saw throughout that time period. And then here's an example, a keychain of the current mascot, Johnny Thunderbird. So we do have a lot more, but if anyone is interested in seeing more or showing off some more of their artifacts, if you have photos or other stories you'd like to share, feel free to contact us in the archives anytime because we'd love to hear and see more of what you have.
Okay.
Would you like my jacket?
That would be wonderful.
Oh, okay, good.
Amazing.
That's good.
Wonderful, Gloria.
Well,
Just to comment on Susie's remark with the cafeterias and the discussion you had earlier, I had very fond memories because there were things that the students could do together when we had decks of cards and things like that. And those of us who are over 50 may remember the game called Canasta.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very
really?
popular in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And with Canasta, you actually use 3 rummy decks of cards, so it could go on forever. So if we started at 9 o'clock in the morning with a Canasta game, we would come and go out of classes and somebody else would take your seat when you went to physics class and you'd come back later and we'd still be playing Canasta like 5 hours later. And it was a lot different back then because there were things you could do that weren't electronic, shall we say, or electronic devices.
My sorority did that, but our game was called Spades.
Ah,
I think
Card
Norman
games
has,
and Monopoly and Scrabble were big back then.
I think Norman has an artifact for us. Norman, what's that?
This is my wife's. She was in Delta Sigma Chi in 68.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, her sorority sister is Peg D'Angelo. Peg has a hen party every year between Thanksgiving and New Year's, and gets about a dozen of her sorority sisters. And this is what the ring looked like
all right, with the Redman.
with the Redman here.
The Indian,
What's
yeah.
on the other side?
It's the year, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I almost never wear it.
This is like all of these pieces, including Gloria's jacket and Jerry's paddle and Richard's beanie. All of these things are examples of material culture, right? So if you were to go to New York Historical Society, for example, or the way that they display their objects is learning history through the objects that we collect. So it's wonderful that you have them. It's wonderful that you're considering donating to the university for posterity. But I think that's fantastic. Erin, I feel like we were kind of moving through the decades and we're ending at the 80s. Is there something that you wanted to talk about in terms of fashion at your time in St. John's? I can't remember if you had
Well,
to show.
the 80s, I also was an aerobic instructor in Alumni Hall. So we can't forget, the electric blue tights and the leg warmers you'd wear in class, but you'd wear them over your jeans. Acid wash jeans that were a little baggy up top, but then they narrowed at the ankle with your slouch socks, your Reebok shoes. And let's not forget the shoulder jackets.
Yeah.
One thing I said to Susan, I go, it's so funny to look back, but part of the reason why is when you're that age, you wear what's in style regardless of your body type. So when I look at myself in shoulder pads, it was probably the worst look I could have ever worn for myself. But then you get older, you mature and say, although I like that, that just doesn't work for me. But back in that day, you all dressed like your friends.
So true, because I think we were talking even on the test run, and I'm glad you brought it up because I do remember Erin because she used to run all the exercise classes with Jane Fonda. She really kicked off the health craze, and as a result, it affected our fashion, like Erin was saying. And Reebok was huge. In fact, I was the very first class of Professor Eugene Sullivan. His name is on the School of Education building. And our case study that we worked on, he got Reebok to come in and we did a whole case study on Reebok. That's how big Reebok was back then as opposed to, Nike and Under Armour. So all of a sudden, like sneakers became really popular and jeans. And I think also, Erin, you brought up, I could not remember the name, or someone brought up Yuppie. Yuppie was like so big, especially being in the business school, having your briefcase, making yourself look like Wall Street. And it was, I think the start, or maybe I'm wrong, Andy could correct me, where labels were starting to come in, because I remember one day we were in student government and my friends, I didn't realize, I guess I was label conscious, but I didn't think I was just gravitating towards the fashion. And someone said, "Oh, I noticed you wear all these labels." And I'm like, I really don't care. So we did a test and they put up 3 shirts. One was label and 2 were not. And they wanted to see if I could pick out the label, even if I didn't know who it was, which I actually did. I did pick out Ralph Lauren, even though I didn't know it was Ralph Lauren. But yeah, labels were really starting to kick up. And the other thing also, if you see photos in the yearbook, there was a lot of drinking in the 80s because we had Rathskeller.
Drinking in the 60s.
Yeah, we had the
Well,
spring
this is the
fling.
time when the
Yeah.
drinking age in New York State and the federal drinking age was not what it was now. It was not.
Yeah, it was 18.
It was
Right.
18, and then
Yeah.
it was 19 until like 1984 or something like that.
Right.
84. So, you know, they changed this because as I understand it, because of issues with drunk driving and things like that.
Yes, the
But-
man, the mothers
Yeah,
against.
right. That lobby, but yes, so you could be in college as a freshman and drink from your
Yep.
freshman year, right? You didn't have to wait until your senior.
So it affected the fashions because in spring fling, all these hats that I showed you, they all had either Miller, because all the beer companies were sponsoring our events. So
Yeah.
I'm sure at least you probably have T-shirts. Everything has, Miller on it, or, so it was all intertwined with each other. The fashion, the drinking, everything. The party.
Another part of the 80s, which I'd like to mention, was jams. The colorful surfer shorts came in.
Oh, yeah.
And this was for the preppy set, not for the Brooklyn set. But I literally threw to a fun shorts party once. And it was like, who could wear the most colorful, the most flowerful, and they were oversized, and that's just what we wore. That with our sneakers and our slouch socks.
Yeah, they were called board shorts.
Board shorts. I
shorts.
live in San Diego. I should know that.
I want to ask the people in the 60s, we, because of Animal House, the movie, what was really big is we used to have toga parties at St. John's. Did everybody in the 60s or 70s, did you guys get into like the toga parties?
No,
I
No?
don't remember.
never.
Fraternities and sororities did.
Oh,
And that was just a theme, but I don't know if it was taken from Animal House, but it was a theme that was, ran through, but it wasn't a major theme.
You do see it in the yearbooks. If you look through
Mhm.
through the years.
Yeah.
And they had toga parties at Manhattan College, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think again, that was the
It
kind
was a
of
theme, like
collegiate-
Andrea said.
Right.
collegiate trend. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember the fraternities throwing toga parties.
Remember that? Yeah.
And what was funny is my sorority, we would literally come in sheets, white, where there was a sorority called Delta Zeta, and they were always dressed up. That's what they were known for. And they all came in with like handmade togas, but they were like in black fabric, but with their pantyhose on and their high heels. So they knew how to make it sexy. Not my sorority, we just grabbed bed sheets, sometimes with prints on them.
Before I have to drop or if Norm leaves, I have to thank you, Susan, and the group putting these things together. I haven't seen Norm in 20 years. We were in TCB together and we formed the TCB Business Association years ago. We were both presidents of it in the early 2000s. And so it was good to see you, Norm. I was recently a Malloy get together, and it turned out that one of my classmates who graduated in '67 happens to be a major orthopedic surgeon at Yale, and he lives 2 towns away from me. So if my back goes out, I have a surgeon classmate. And I hope you're all, I'm going to put it up to the camera to see if this works, but I hope you all wear your St. John's ring.
Oh, I've never
That was my,
had one.
That's very nice.
I wear it all the time because it's more like like a month ring, like a garnet.
Yeah.
But I often get asked if I went to St. John's Law School because of the business scales, the commerce scales.
Yeah. That's
But
funny.
it's always on my hand, Susan. They always ask in Eastern Connecticut, oh, you're not a UConn person? What school did you go to?
You're Johnny, through and through.
Thanks a
I
lot.
realize I do have my ring.
You have yours?
See, yep.
Oh, yeah, that's the one I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the girls' rings. Yeah.
Oh,
That's very nice.
Yeah.
I'll tell you sometime, Susan, offline, there was a special reason for this ring. Both my uncles got garnet as their birthstone, and they were both in World War II. My grandmother bought them the same ring. So there's a picture of our three hands together 20 years ago with our signet rings on.
That's
Very
nice.
nice.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's
Love
the
to know more
classic.
about it because your all the rings you've shown are different than the ones, the 3 rings we have in the
Right.
archive. So please do share more information and photos.
Yeah, that's
Be a really interesting exhibit, don't you think, Alyse, to have the different class
Yeah.
rings over time? Because I have never seen Richard's ring either.
no.
That is a special one.
Yeah, it was kind of unique to the business school back then.
Yes.
We don't have any women's rings either. They're all 3 men's rings.
Oh, there
yeah,
you
the
go.
one that
Interesting to see yours as well.
Mhm.
that's the one
Yes,
that's
very
Yeah, I had the
It
big
doesn't
clunky one
completely
you just
fit
showed from
anymore.
Manhattan College, but
no.
the big clunky one from Manhattan is too big to wear. I won't get it my old knuckle.
My father graduated St. John's University in 1950, and his ring had the Indian on the side. Literally, it was almost worn smooth because he never took it off.
Wow.
Oh,
Right now. Yep,
Very
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite worn, this one.
Yeah.
I actually talked.
Someone's at my door. I have to run for a minute.
I actually talked about this in my 3rd lecture, and this would be a really good example of how integrated the Native American mascot was into the culture of St. John's for so long. And that's one of the reasons why when they tried to change, well, not they tried to, when they did change it, there was such resistance because you can see even from the material culture how much it is integrated into all of the objects, into the clothing, into the class rings, into so on. And so making that change was not an easy one, right?
I think also with the fashions, as you can see, as we go on, when I look at this shirt, it just brings me back. And then I think about all my classmates and all the fun we had. And so sometimes it's not just putting on clothing, it just has such sentimentality to it. It's amazing how you can hear everybody in our voices, right? How we get so excited talking about, our college days and the fun that we had. So it's really nice. I really appreciate everybody, bringing all their memorabilia and just sharing their experiences and how even though it's 60s, 70s, and 80s, and somehow we still had that St. John's experience, but maybe just different times affected us, differently. And I want to thank, Susie and Alyse and Andy. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise into it as well. It was really fun discussion. I'm going to show you another, I was telling you, a rugby shirt. And of course, I'll share a picture of me, of what I looked like in the 80s.
Let's
Can
see.
you see it?
Is that a Benetton shirt?
That was another big,
Oh, yes,
Benetton,
Yeah,
big, right, Erin?
Oh, yeah.
And if you see in the back,
But I couldn't afford one. They were expensive.
They were expensive.
yeah, they were. Did you see the Miller in the back too? Again, once again, it's many years ago.
Yeah, we were talking about this before with Andy about how that kind of American sportswear look is so distinctive, right? I mean, it has expanded to the rest of the
There you
world. Like blue jeans.
Mm-hmm.
It is so. When I see that kind of rugby, and it is that kind of now Ralph Lauren kind of Tommy.
Right, like you were saying, yeah.
It's so distinctively American fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. Well, does anyone have any last parting words before we?
I have a Dr.
St. John's.
I love it. I have Dr. Mulvihill. I'm not sure if she has a comment, so I'm just going to turn her on for a
Sure.
second. Hi, Dr. Mulvihill.
She doesn't have a next to her name.
Sorry.
Dr. Mulvihill?
There's a muted symbol.
She's muted now.
Susan, the comment about the white blazer, that was mine. And I graduated in 62. And we always dressed up. And we wore the white blazer, which I don't have, but I have the pocket. And the pocket has the St. John's insignia on it. So I cut that off when I got rid of the jacket. But women were also expected to wear nylon stockings.
Yes.
You wore nylon stockings and a pleated skirt and probably a sweater or a blouse with your blazer.
Mm-hmm.
And downstairs where you're talking about the first floor in St. John's Hall,
Yes.
there was one wing that had the women's lounge.
Oh.
And that's where most of the girls stayed. And it was almost it was the unisex area. And the other area that was perpendicular was for men mostly.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about because it's shaped like a U.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Oh,
That's lovely. So did you have just one blazer and then you had to wear it every day that you went to school?
All right, you didn't have to wear the blazer. The blazer was a big deal to get a blazer. And so you did not have to wear it all the time. Oftentimes it was just a sweater or a blouse. And I wear my St. John's ring, particularly for events at SJU. And I'm sorry, I don't have it on right now, but I absolutely love it. That was the prize for your 4 years in school. Because remember, at that time, women would just drop out of college as soon as they had a steady boyfriend. And they never got their class ring. So when you got your class ring, that was better than a diamond ring.
oh, interesting.
Mine has the Indian on the side, the Redman, and it's that beautiful red stone. It's just stunning. And the women's ring at that time was actually the same size, but it was hollowed out inside. The men's ring was heavier.
Very interesting detail. I think, Alyse, you're going to have to search for other artifacts, possibly. It seems like, as Dr. Mulvihill is talking, the ring has so much significance. Hopefully down the line, maybe there will be an exhibit on the history of the ring. I mean, I wonder when it started, because obviously it didn't start in the 19th century, right? So when did class rings, this is actually something I have to look into, when did class rings become a thing? In what class did it start?
That's a good question.
I think our earliest class ring, we have 3. If I can find the link, I'll put it in the chat box for everybody. Because we did post them on our blog and social media. But I think the earliest is 1926, and then one from the 50s, and I think the other one is from the 60s. But I'll try and find that link for you now.
1826. Really interesting.
Interesting. And the white jacket too is something that they get hands on also would be interesting. That's great.
Thank you, Dr. Mulvihill, for telling us.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh, my pleasure. Delightful seminar.
Thank you. Well, I guess that wraps it up. Well, it was great reminiscing, great way to celebrate, our commencement and the graduates, our newly graduates. Kind of, talking about St. John's and the future. Like, we'll see what the future lies in fashion as we move forward. We'll see. And we'll probably it would be nice to have this recording and then talk about it maybe in 10 years from now. And kind of prepared. It would be interesting, right? But thanks everybody for the time. I hope everyone has a great day and enjoy the beautiful weather. Thanks for the link too, Alyse. Thank you.
So everyone, thank you for sharing all of your
Everyone.
objects from the past. We started talking about fashion, but I realized it's also, as you started presenting, a wonderful way to talk about history through material culture. So,
Right.
thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Bye-bye now.
Bye bye.